Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 117. Early season deer hunting tactics with Dr. Grant Woods, Growing Deer TV. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Skip Peterson from Gearhead Archery. Gear up for another amazing podcast with Jay and Dusty on the Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, everybody, this is Craig Cushman at Hunter Specialties, and you're getting ready to hear another great podcast from the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
I'm Lee Lukoski.
And I'm Tiffany Lukoski, and you're listening to our favorite hunting podcast on iTunes.
The Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Welcome to the show. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. I hope you're enjoying your early season deer hunting so far. I know I am, and I know that my good friend Dusty Phillips is too.
Yeah, I am, man. It's crazy. Jay, have you ever felt like you just need to hear from somebody that really knows the whitetail? Have you ever felt that?
All the time. Sometimes, because you question yourself all the time when you're in the woods. Am I doing this right? Am I thinking about this the right way? Should I have done that? It happens all the time.
It's just it's a never-ending, questioning your tactics and skills, and you're always wondering. And then you're like, who can I contact for that? You ever thought that way?
I do. All the time. And a lot of times I end up tuning into the podcast, to be quite honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree to that. But that there's somebody that really has the knowledge and really has put in the time and the capabilities to study the whitetail and study a whole lot of other aspects that goes into hunting whitetail.
Really? What are you talking about?
Dr. Grant Woods.
Oh, man. He's a blast from the past. We've had him on the show before, and it was a while ago. Let me find the episode number so you can listen to this in a tandem effort. He was on the Big Buck podcast back in November 2013, where we talked about deer biology 101 and growing big deer. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's amazing. But, season opening up here, it seems like that we need to get into some early season tactics for, hunting mature whitetails.
Yes. And as we are in the season, this is a great time to talk about early season tactics and what you can do right now to make your hunt more successful before it gets into the rut part of the season.
Let's get the man that can help us out and tell us the factual information that he studied for all these years. Dr. Grant Woods on the mic.
Dr. Grant Woods, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back on the show. We talked to you, I think it was a couple of years ago now. We always appreciate an insight as to what's happening out there in the deer woods, and you're just the man to talk to.
Well, I just got out of deer woods a few hours ago, or less than that, actually, taking my 84-year-old father hunting, so I can give you a little bit of insight. But the night before, September 15th, is the opening day of deer season here in Missouri, and we had an extremely exciting hunt that first night.
Excellent. You want to fill us in on what happened there?
No, I don't want to give those secrets away. No, I'm just teasing. We had been watching all summer, and we had I live in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. It's basically an oak hickory forest. There's no ag. You don't see any, combines or big tractors or seed trucks or grain drills. There's none of that in counties around me. So we're hunting timber. We're timber hunters, and we have a big white oak crop this year. I had one coming on, which makes it very difficult to hunt because, deer are here, there, everywhere. Really, really difficult to pattern. So we were like, oh, gosh, it's going to be one of those years. But we'd set up on a white oak tree in the middle of a food plot, thinking, those are usually open-grown oaks, drop a little bit earlier, and actually produce a few more acorns. Just, you've seen big oak trees in cemeteries or city blocks or campuses or whatever, and they have big, huge acorns.
Yep.
And gosh almighty, I thought, well, this is a shooting fish in the barrel type night. We'll at least get a doe on here. And about 30 minutes before dark, a nice 3-year-old buck came out, and then another one, and then another one, and some does and fawns. And sure enough, a 4-year-old came out. We try to shoot 4-year-old or older here just for me. My dad and kids got a green card, shoot whatever they want. And we watched those deer. It was like a winter storm was coming in. They came out into the food plot, never came to the acorn tree, put their head down and gorged themselves. And I'm hearing that from a lot of my hunting buddies throughout much of the Midwest. Deer just stepping out and gorging themselves in food plots. So kind of a current recent tip going on right there.
Like that. Okay. So we'd like to talk early season deer hunting tactics. And I know you study this day in, day out down where you are, and you kind of filled us in on all the stuff that was going on the last time we spoke, like how you study them. But I wanted to specifically zone in on early season tactics with you and find out after all the years of research that you've been conducting, what are some of the key points that we can kind of take away, and what should we be focusing on as hunters right now?
Boy, early season buck hunting can be really challenging because it's a period of change. So, early season here in Missouri is September 15th. Iowa doesn't open to October 1st. There's a little bit of range in there. South Carolina opened to August 15th. South Florida opens in July. A lot of people don't know that. The rut in South Florida is in July. Literally, bucks are breeding does during July. So early season's kind of, but let's just take, the bulk of the whitetails range, mid-September, early October.
Right.
Bucks are going from a very low testosterone level, and so they're growing velvet, and they're hanging out in bachelor groups and tolerating each other. And right as bow season's opening throughout much of that area, that's all changing. That testosterone level is kicking up, and with that, it sends some cues for the antlers to switch from pumping protein up there. And this is important, to pumping calcium. That's what makes a hard antler, calcium. They actually change composition. And so deer, before that testosterone level surge occurs, are chasing protein. Bucks and does. I mean, men, they're just really chasing protein. And right when that surge of testosterone occurs in bucks and hormones change in does also, they're stopping lactating, stuff like that, they're going for energy. They are predisposed to store fat for the winter. Southern deer, northern deer, they're going to store fat. And so, like me and a lot of guys and gals across America, boy, you spend all summer watching a food plot, or if you live where they are, bean fields or whatever, and you got deer on the clock. I mean, men are just coming out, and you're like entering the big buck contest locally, and you're going to slam this bruiser the first day of season because he's like clockwork coming out wherever is the source of protein every day. And about the time season opens up, you don't see the deer anymore, and you swear poachers got him or Martians got him or, something happened.
Right.
But
I've
most
said
likely
before.
what happened, and that may happen somewhere, I'm not sure, but most likely what happened to us is when that hormone changed, literally the nutritional needs of the deer changes, and they're not stepping out in that bean field because that's not giving them what they need at that time. The pods aren't ripe yet, and they're going to a source of carbohydrates, whether that's corn or depending on where you live, or acorns where I live here, or feed if you're in parts of Texas or something like that. They're going to carbohydrates. And that change occurs in a 15-day window, more or less, about when most of the states open bow season. And so it's bothersome to hunters because you've had this trail camera pattern, or you're watching deer or whatever's going on, and just about time you grab the bow and get in the stand, the pattern changes. So that's kind of rule number one. Expect the pattern change.
Okay, good.
Take an inventory of deer during the summer. These are the deer, and what it's really telling you, as at minimum, their home range overlaps my hunting area. But
Gotcha.
Realize that sometime between September 15th and October 1st, they're probably going to shift in most areas, the areas of the home range they're using.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
So you inventory during the summer, you start patterning the kill later on.
Gotcha. All right. So you know there's a change coming and you need to prepare for it. You're just taking a tally of what's in an area.
Yep.
Got it.
And along with that, when that testosterone level is low, and most guys can probably relate to this, you're just a little bit more subdued. You're not so quick to jump in a fight or, have road rage or whatever's going on. and bucks are the same way. Boy, it's amazing what you can get away with in summer. Right. You're like, man, this deer, he didn't know I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, he probably knows you're there. He just doesn't care. You're not a threat. He doesn't care. And when that switch flips, and it flips because of decreasing daylight, the decreasing daylight sends a signal, and I won't bore everyone with all the science, but through the eyes to some certain glands in the body. And that signal not only says, hey, go get some carbohydrates, go get some Snickers bars instead of salad bar, and it's also saying, you know what, you need to be as big and as bad and as alert as you can because the game is on. Put your game face on. And so hunters get faked out by saying, man, those deer they don't even know I'm here. This is going to be an easy deer to tag. To, man, I stepped on a stick and I haven't seen a deer in 3 months after I stepped on that stick. I don't know what's going on out there. So that's kind of rule number 2 is realize the alertness of deer literally is going to change in that same time frame.
I've noticed that, and I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it always seemed that way. All right. So this is something you've studied. You now have a trigger mechanism as to why this happens, when it happens, and now how.
Yeah. What do you do about it?
What do we do about it? Yeah.
So the best thing, and we all don't have this advantage, but the best thing is have a history on the property where you're hunting so you don't get faked out. You know, man, like here at my place, gosh, I'm seeing deer in food plots all summer and kids are seeing them, whatever. But I know I need to be on the back of a white oak ridge somewhere come bow season. And most likely if there's an acorn crop. And let me throw out a little ditty here. The best way to kind of predict your acorn crop, of course, is go out scouting with your binos or whatever. But a really useful thing is think about, for white oaks, think back a few months to the spring, and was there a late frost? Because the number one killer of white oaks is a late frost. Oak trees, they develop flowers like a rose or other flowers, except they're really small and they're not glamorous, so no one really pays attention to them. And those flowers occur in most areas about when a late frost would occur.
Okay.
And a frost will damage those flowers so they won't pollinate and they won't make acorns. And on a red oak, there's a huge amount of confusion about this. Red oaks, when they flower one year, if they flowered successfully in 2014, they will make an acorn during 2015.
Okay.
But they flower every year, so they could have developing acorns, which are really small and no one really notices, and full-size acorns on the same tree. So a red oak can make acorns every year, but the acorns we're hunting flowered the year before, if that's not too confusing. So I'm always thinking about the frost the previous year for red oaks and a late frost this year for white oaks. And, of course, deer prefer white oaks always. They're lower in acid. White oaks rot quicker because they don't have as much acid in them. And because they don't have as much acid in them, they're not as bitter for deer to eat. So deer are going to go to white oaks first.
Okay.
But if we have a warm rain, like we may, and it sounds horrible, but we may have been blessed here. We just last week had about 3.5 inches of a pretty warm rain when white oaks were starting to fall here. And you know, white oaks are, of course, they're seeds. So let's think about this. We get warm water. That acorn falls down a moist, warm bed of leaves. It's still pretty warm outside, sun shining, and a big warm rain. What's going to happen? Well, that seed is going to sprout. And as soon as the seed starts forming at taproot or sprouting or busting the shell, the chemistry changes such that a deer is just not going to eat it. A deer is not going to touch it. And so I'm not trying to be mean, like I want my deer and squirrels and turkey to starve, but we have so many acorns here that if, you know, a week's worth of them rotted, it sure makes my hunting a lot easier.
Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. All right. Let's go back to that tree for a minute. And it's the white oaks specifically. So the flowers on the tree from the spring of 2014 are the acorns we are now watching drop from the trees today. In 2015.
On a red oak.
On a red oak. Okay.
So a red oak takes 2 years to develop. A white oak flowers and develops in the same year, in the same growing season.
Got it. Okay. Boy, that's super good information to know.
Yeah. And if you're in an area, like most areas have a mixture of red and white oaks, deer are going to eat white oaks first.
Yep.
Because they're lower in acid. And you know, if you walk through the woods, you pick one up, peel the husk off, taste it. You can taste the difference. A red oak will pucker you up quickly. It's very bitter.
Right.
And as it falls and lays on the ground and weathers, you know, hot, cold, and rain on it, that acid, it's actually a tannic acid, will leach out of the red oak and they'll become more palatable as time goes on. So we had a huge red oak crop here at my place last year. And when we were killing turkeys this spring in March and April, they were full of red oak acorns that were still good, obviously good. And so, no wonder we had trouble patterning deer last fall. There's so many acorns on the ground. I mean, they eat bed within 10 feet. It's hard to get between them.
Right.
And hard to get a pattern because there's just food everywhere. The resource isn't limited. So, they can be here today. You bump them, they're there tomorrow. They don't have to come back. It's not like a soybean field or the last standing crop in Iowa. Everybody's cut their corn and you got a little bit of corn left standing. Those deer are coming in. They're going to fight the gauntlet to get there. When there's acorns everywhere, that's just not the case. Boy, you bump them, they're gone.
Okay. So in reality, and like you said, you're not hoping for the deer to starve, but you're looking for a smaller acorn crop where perhaps there was a frost the year before on the red oaks.
Yep.
And
a little fewer, so if you live in the Smoky Mountains or, here in the Ozark Mountains or wherever it's primarily timbered, you learn to really dislike acorns because they make hunting very, very hard. And by the way, they're not that good for a deer. Deer eat them. I eat fudge. Fudge isn't very good for me. Deer eat acorns. They're about 7% protein. And tannic acid, the acid in acorns, actually binds to calcium. We want deer to keep calcium because, calcium turns into the bones or bigger antlers. And when deer eat a lot of acorns, they're pooping a lot of calcium out the back end.
Gotcha.
So if you look at and some of these things are just, I'm a simple scientist. I like, I wasn't the smartest rock in the stack, and I like stuff that's really easy to understand. So if you pull up the Boone and Crockett map, just Google Boone and Crockett map, and you look at the distribution or Pope and Young, either one, of trophy distribution, and then you go to the U.S. Forest Service and pull up the distribution map of oaks across America, they're opposite. Where there's a lot of oaks, there are very few record book deer. And where there are very few oak trees, which probably means there's agriculture, there's a whole bunch of record book deer.
Gotcha.
There is nowhere, and I mean nowhere, where there's a whole heavy distribution of oak trees and a heavy distribution of record book deer. They are not mutually exclusive, but they certainly exclude each other. They're polar opposites. That's
fascinating because I would have thought the opposite, but if the tannic acid's binding to the calcium, it's never getting to the antler. It just can't.
Yeah, everybody thinks, boy, those big old timbered areas, the bucks are growing old and getting big, but think about the big timber belts. Now, where I love acorns, where I love them, you go to, parts of Ohio or Kansas or some of the places I hunt, and it's, 60, 70, 80% open land, cropland, pasture, whatever.
Yep.
And little blocks of oak trees here and there. When those oaks are raining, it's like a feeder going off, and where all the deer in that neighborhood are. They're gonna abandon corn and soybeans to go eat acorns. They've been eating acorns since there's been deer, and that cycle is not going to change, literally.
Gotcha.
So you're out in western Kansas. The primary oak tree in Kansas is a bur oak, which is a form of white oak. It doesn't have much tannic acid, and the acorns are huge. They're literally about the size of a golf ball, literally. So deer don't have to eat a whole lot of those things to get filled up, and you're out there on the prairie in Kansas, and there's one giant bur oak that somehow survived the fire and whatever out there. When it's fallen, it is like you fight your buddy for that stand. Deer are coming to that tree. And so, in that situation, I love acorns. They're awesome. It's like finding the old pear tree. One of my favorite early season tactics is, on national forest land or land where it's tough to get a pattern on deer. There's all these old house places, because national forest, we got to remember, boys, wasn't national forest. A lot of it wasn't national forest 100 years ago. That was private land that the government either bought or took through eminent domain or whatever. And there was homesteads all over there. And those homesteaders, they didn't run to Kroger and get some groceries. They had to provide it. So they almost always had some fruit trees in their yard. Almost always.
Yep.
And some of those fruit trees are very hardy, especially pear trees. Some apples, but especially pears. And they're still making fruit. And you're in the middle of a national forest, there's acorns everywhere, pine trees, whatever it is, and you stumble on a pear tree that's making fruit. You want to do two things. You want to put a stand there, and you want to pick up some of the old pears because those seeds, that tree has survived without any maintenance. No herbicide, no fertilizer. That tree just had the genetic makeup to survive, and you want to plant that tree at your farm.
Okay. Very good tip. So
that's a great tip.
Thinking about the acorns. All right. So if you're in the Midwest and you find a patch of trees that have acorns on them, this bur oak tree.
Bur oak, yeah. Yeah.
And how do the deer zone in on it? Is it a smell thing or is it a sound?
I don't know. I'm gonna totally embarrass myself here and tell you one of the 10,000 times my wife has proven me wrong, or my wife is not a biologist at all. And I was coming back from some trip where we've been trapping deer or something. And I'm like, we go to this area, where corn's illegal, and I don't think anybody's baiting or anything, and we put corn down to draw deer in, to get them under our rocket net so we can do whatever we're doing to the deer at that project. And within 2 days, always, the deer find the corn pile. I mean, they don't even know what corn looks like, and they find the corn pile. How is that possible? And I'm thinking of some deep, PhD, super theory, and my wife said, just goes, oh, that's so simple. The little fly birds find it, the ones that eat corn, like cardinals or whatever,
Yep.
and they're eating it, and they make a feeding sound, and the deer know when they're making a feeding sound, because grain-eating birds, birds have a big beak that can crack grain, are going to eat on the same stuff that deer eat on. And the deer hear that, and they just know, well, there's something to eat over there. I'm going to go check it out. And I got to tell you, out of 11 years of college and everything I've did, that's probably the best theory I've ever heard of being accurate of how deer find corn that quickly.
Interesting.
Because, deer have a learning curve for new food. Like, for example, here at my place, Trace and I have bought this land 13 years ago, and there's no soybeans around. There's still hardly any soybeans around. A few of my neighbors are now planting food plots, but there's no commercial beans around for miles, hundreds of miles maybe, I don't know. And we planted soybeans the first 3 years, and I don't think a leaf was missing due to deer browse. They would walk right through the soybean field and eat the ragweed where the fertilizer truck hit it. I mean
Really?
that literally. I mean that literally. If deer have never seen soybeans, they're not going to know their food.
Right.
And just like, you hear this all the time, guys planting turnips, Nebraskas. Well, I planted Nebraskas out there and doggone deer didn't touch it. I always tell them, good, plant it again next year, because they will. And what I usually do is mix a little something in with the brassicas in areas that haven't seen brassicas before, wheat or something deer know to eat, and just get them nuzzling around in there and just finally want to take a bite. Then it doesn't take long for the rest of them to figure it out. But here at my place, I swear to you, I could not find a leaf missing. There would be trails through the soybeans. There would not be a leaf missing from them.
And you can't hardly grow beans here in Ohio without half of them eaten down by the deer.
That's right. Well, same way at my place now. I mean, they know them now. They love them now. So that's another great point. Guys always talking about what the deer want to eat during the early season. I tell them it's real easy. What they ate last year. Deer have a very slow learning curve. They don't like surprises. That's why, they don't like the smell of humans or whatever. They don't like surprises. So, if your deer are used to eating wheat or a mixture of wheat and brassicas in September, October, plant it again this year. Just because someone comes out with the latest, greatest food plot, whatever, doesn't mean it's going to work well on your land, and the deer aren't used to it. And I'll give you a perfect example that, I'm guilty of many years ago, many years ago, almost 20 years ago. I started a company called Biologic, and then I partnered up with Mossy Oak later on. And this guy got a hold of me. He says, man, I've got the greatest deer food. We're going out here in West Texas, and deer are coming from miles to eat this stuff. And it grows more than they can eat, and it's inexpensive. And it's inexpensive. It's drought proof. Deer love it. It's everything you want in a food plot plan. I said, really? Oh, man, it's a great thing. So I checked it out, and sure enough, it's like caribou migration going to this guy's field out in West Texas. And it's 6 feet tall and growing. Deer eating it, and it's just growing and eating and growing. And it's inexpensive. It was called brown midrib. It's a special type of sorghum that's actually the stalk is palatable, not just the seed head. And I'm thinking, I just tell you, I'm greedy, thinking I am going to make $1 million off this. Man, it's everything you want in a food plot blend. It's drought resistant. Deer love it. They can't eat it fast enough. So we buy a bunch of it, stick it in a bag, and I got to tell you, I'm not sure a deer ate that anywhere east of Mississippi River, anywhere, period. So I had to take my greedy hat off, put my scientific hat on, and it was really easy once I started thinking was, in West Texas, especially that summer, it was really dry out there. There's just not a lot to eat. I think if you had a green pickup, deer would have ran out there and started licking on it.
Right.
and so deer are selective feeders, and they're going to eat the best food in their neighborhood and pretty much ignore the rest. And that was by far the best food in that neighborhood. You brought over east where there's, natural blackberry or persimmons or ragweed or whatever. It was so far down the totem pole, deer didn't touch it. And it was a tough lesson for me to learn, but I never forgot that lesson.
That's a good one.
Early season's about food.
Okay.
And a changing pattern. And I like to plant my food plots because if you're in an area where the acorns aren't falling, or if you're in an ag area, those agricultural soybeans, I bet where you guys are, they're starting to get pretty rank, pretty mature. The palatability is decreasing. And if you've got something young coming up 3 to 6 inches tall that's nice and tender and lush, deer are going to switch over to that pretty quickly. So A tremendous technique for early season is what we call hidey-ho or small food plots back in the timber, back somewhere where they don't really associate with danger. And I mean, these things can be pretty small, like living room size or whatever. You just want enough food. You're not feeding a deer herd with the hidey-ho food plot. You just want enough food to attract them. And I often find like an old pond just went dry, or where a big tree's been struck by lightning, somewhere where there's enough sunshine reaching the forest floor for crops to grow. And I usually do them with hand tools. I take my backpack blower or my hand rake or whatever and rake the duff out of the way. If there's just a few saplings in there, I just plant around them. I mean, again, this isn't a beautiful food plot. This is a killing place. And oftentimes I'll just take in a bag or two of fertilizer and some seed and right before rain, throw it down. It's important to do it right before rain. I'll explain that in a second. Throw it down and go and hang my stand that day. And then I don't go back until it's that time to grow and deer find it, because the first day I go there, I go to kill a deer. I don't go there. I don't go put a trail camera on it. I don't scout it. When I go there, I go to kill a deer.
Right.
That's what I do. And since you're doing this by hand tools, you're not disking or anything. You want to do it either during the rain, right before rain, because two factors. You'd be stunned at how much of the seed rodents, squirrels, mice, whatever, and birds will remove. And then that rain will help the seed get seed to soil contact. You got, a seed laying on top of a leaf. It may germinate. It's still going to taproot out, but it's not going to grow because it's not getting that root down the soil. So the rain will help kind of wash the seed around and get it buried in soil a little bit. And those little hidey-ho food plots, early and late season, are tremendous. And so most forage plants, you want to plant about 45 to 60 days before the first frost. So here in southern Missouri, our first frost is about October 10th. A little bit further north, the frost is a little bit earlier. So that means we want to be planting here, Ryan, about mid-August, further north, about the 1st of August, something like that. You get the plants enough time to grow and get big enough, and deer time to figure out, hey, this is a safe food source. And so deer, they need food cover water.
Yep.
And everyone just kind of stops right there. And they're stopping one step short of being a successful hunter. They need food cover water that they don't associate with danger, because the number one motivating factor of a deer is fear over the rut or anything else. It's survival. They want to survive. They have fear and they want to survive. So a hidey-ho food plot, oftentimes it's a new place for me. I've never hunted it before. There's never been a tree stand there before. Deer don't associate it with danger. I'm going to go in, rake it out. I'm going to plant it. I'm not coming back till the wind's right. The plants have had time to grow, and I'm going to go in on that day with full intentions of killing a deer off that plot that day.
Gotcha. So you're kind of conditioning them.
That's a great word, yeah. Conditioning,
okay.
Yeah. We all remember probably from 7th grade science, whatever, Pavlov's dog. Pavlov was an old German scientist, and I don't know why he did this or had the budget to do it, but he fed dogs meat, probably steak, every afternoon at 3 p.m. And then he rang a bell every time he fed him, rang a bell. And then 60 days later, he rang the bell but didn't feed him, and they salivated. And that's where the first study of conditioned response came from.
Right.
And if you think about it, about everything a hunter does is condition deer to avoid them. And
right.
So I want to hunt in a way where I'm not hunting deer that I've conditioned to avoid my area or my stand or whatever. So, you see deer in a city park, they're used to joggers and people all the time. They hardly get out of the way because they don't have any fear of humans. They don't have any real reason to fear humans. They're conditioned just to consider humans within 20 or 30 yards, just a neutral, non-threatening behavior.
Is just one plot that is a conditioning plot, so to speak, is that enough? Or should you have several different spots?
Yeah, that's a great point. What I like to do is, I can make these plots in about an hour or 2 hours, depending on how tough it is to hang the stand or whatever. Mm-hmm. So starting about late July or early August, I'm going to probably make a plot every Saturday. And so they're going to be in different stages of growth and tenderness, and I'm going to do that up till it's just too close to frost date or gets too dry or whatever. And that way you've got new stages of growth coming off at different areas around the property. And again, these don't have to be large. These are 1/8 acre or less type deals. They're not pretty. They're not going to be in the front cover of, Farmers of America magazine.
Right.
These are just a food source in the middle of a non-food source area that deer do not associate with danger.
And what are we looking for areas where these things will grow? Do they have to be in certain plots of trees, like certain trees we're looking for, looking like oaks? Doesn't matter.
Really the key factor is enough sunlight. You need at least 50% sunlight during the day.
Okay.
Plants are photosynthesizing. They got to make energy. So again, I like old ponds or where lightning's killed a big tree, somewhere in the forest in a secluded area. Maybe it's the back of a CRP field that you just take a weed eater and, cut out a little area and then take a rake and rake that duff away so seed will make seed to soil contact. So your first criteria is sunlight. Second criteria is you got to be able to get down to the dirt level with a hand tool or whatever to get seed to soil contact. And I'm not worried about the quality of the soil because, I can tote a 50-pound bag of fertilizer and the area is so small that's like super fertilizing it. And I don't really like these where I can get my 4-wheeler too or something because I don't want my, selfishly, I don't want my buddy finding it. This is for me to hunt. So, these little hidey-ho food plots, I'm telling you, you can carry everything on your back. You need to make them, and they are a tremendous tool.
Gotcha. And how much of a bag are you carrying in? Is it just enough to just follow the instructions on your bag? What your coverage going to be?
So wheat, for example, if you're broadcasting wheat, you're going to plant like 100 pounds per acre, and if you're planting a tenth of an acre, you're planting 10 pounds.
Okay.
So usually I got about 10 pounds of some kind of seed, less if you're doing a brassica. If deer eat brassicas in your area, guys, 4 pounds of brassica will plant a whole acre, so you just need a couple pounds of brassica. Because these are rough areas, not all the seed is going to germinate. I'm going to plant at a little heavier rate than normal. This isn't a perfectly tilled Iowa cornfield, so I'm going to plant a little heavier than normal. You're going to assume that the deer are going to eat it. So here's a kind of a concept or a rule that maybe some guys miss. Everyone has, all the bags have a recommended planting rate. And those are basically based on agricultural recommendations, considering that plant's going to mature like a normal soybean farmer is going to plant 180, depending on the soil quality, to 220,000 seeds per acre, or roughly, depending on the bean, about 50 pounds per acre or so, okay?
Yep.
I tend to plant in my food plots 80 to 100 pounds per acre of soybeans because the portional stems are going to be browsed or bit off when they're so young, they're never going to mature. And if I plant a normal rate, then I'm going to have a pretty sparse field come deer season.
Right.
If I plant an above normal rate, I know that, let's just use a third as a rule of thumb, the plants are going to be damaged by browse pressure. And because I planted heavy, there's still enough stems out there per square foot to fill in the field come hunting season.
Gotcha.
And people say, well, gosh, that's expensive, isn't it? And I'm like, $30 extra seed is nothing compared to dozing out 3 more acres of food plot.
Right.
And the other advantage is, I'm not a great shot. I like the deer pretty close to my stand, so if I can concentrate the deer in a smaller food plot, that's to my advantage as a hunter.
Gotcha. I love that tip. All right. So what other things should we be addressing other than acorns and food plots for early season tactics? Is there anything we should be thinking about?
So deer, as soon as deer shed velvet, they're starting to think about dominance already. I mean, I watched a couple bucks shoving around night before last. They're not fighting. They're just, tinkling and shoving out dominance, but it doesn't matter if you're in first grade or 12th grade. If you hear a fight in the hallway, you're probably going to look. You may not come too close, but you're going to come look. And so don't be afraid to have a grunt call with you. And, this is a November big ball and grunt, grunt, snort, wheeze, grunt that you're blowing the big bull of the woods horn on.
Yeah.
But don't be scared to just, you got a deer at 100 yards, it's getting dark, you want to get him in for a better look or a shot. Toot on that thing just real lightly, and I think you'll find, and I did the same thing the other night, is at this time of year, if you use it appropriately, use it lightly, it's either neutral, the deer totally ignore it, or they're curious and come check it out. Now, deer's 30 yards away, don't blow on the thing because you're going to blow him out of the woods.
Okay.
But he's 100 yards, I the other night, I started super light, and I just, every minute or two, I'd crank it up just a touch so I could finally get some type of reaction that I knew at least they heard it.
Okay.
And they're either going to respond or they're going to be neutral. And each week, literally each week till, mid-November or so, you can be a little bit more aggressive. But don't leave those tools at home. Now, I'm not up there in the stand crashing antlers as hard as I can together this time of year. That's not going to work. But and between rattling or grunt call, 100% of the time, I'd rather have a grunt call. I mean, both are good tools. But a grunt call is almost always neutral or positive. And again, the wrong time to use a grunt call is that deer's 50 yards or somewhere where he knows a deer is not there, and you blow that grunt call, he's going to pinpoint exactly where you are or blow out the area, one or the other.
Gotcha. All right, so we can use some sounds in the woods to our advantage.
Yeah, and mock scrapes are awesome this time of year. I don't know if y'all seen our videos on mock scrapes.
Yep.
They don't have to be fancy. You don't have to do anything fancy. We literally, folks, we take a T-post because because I'm lazy, we take a T-post and drive it where we want the deer to be standing when we're going to shoot. And there may be 20 scrapes on the edge of the food plot, but none of them are, right wind direction or by a big enough tree for a stand or, whatever the problem is. So we go out in front of where we want the deer to be to our advantage. We drive a T-post and we go cut an oak or hickory sapling that's about the right height. And it's usually an inch and a half through, but the secret is it's going to have, a big horizontal limb to the ground that's about 4 feet off the ground. And there's no magic 54 inches, 48 inches. Deer don't always, scrape on the same tree. Trees don't all grow the same. Just something within that reach. 4 feet, 4.5 feet, something like that. Zip tie that tree to the T-post, and you'll be stunned at what happens because you put a really easy limb for a scraped right height out in the middle of a field, I just about promise you deer are going to use it. They want to be out there where they can detect predators all around. They don't want to be on the edge of the bush where the big bad coyote or the booger bear can get them.
Gotcha. Okay. And when you say T-post, what is that? Describe that in more
just
detail.
a steel fence post, a T-post.
Yep.
Any kind of thing you can secure the tree to.
Okay.
T-posts are cheap. You can buy them, at any farm store, and they drive easy in the ground. You can pull them up and use them again the next year. They're just easy.
Gotcha. So you're basically making your own tree,
yeah,
in a sense.
I take a forked limb, and there's a reason just so I'm not putting my stinky human hand, because I'm usually sweating after I drive the T-post and everything. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a forked limb and cut the forks off and reach up there and break the overhanging limb so it's hanging down. I want it to look like another deer's already used it. And I'm going to take that forked limb and I'm going to paw up the dirt right under that overhanging limb, because again, it's a visual effect. I mean, and it's also an olfactory or an odor effect. What else is digging up dirt that time of year in the deer woods? A big 3-foot circle. Not much.
Right.
So fresh dirt is a really good deer attractant. And some people put, deer urines or whatever in there. I don't. I don't use any scent like that at all. I don't want to alert the deer to look at me in the stand. I don't want to spill it on me or put it on me. I don't want the deer looking at me in the stand. My whole objective is not to draw attention to me. I may urinate myself in that scrape. All mammal urine breaks down to ammonia very quickly. You guys, I know, I'm 54 years old. I remember, but used to be privies or outhouses back behind the church I grew up in. There wasn't even running water in the church, and it smelled like ammonia. And one of the old ladies out there cleaning, all mammal urine breaks down to ammonia rapidly. And just think about this, guys. Here's just something to think about, how rapidly urine breaks down. Most of us have probably seen a doe go in front of our stand or something, during November or whatever, and a buck will cut that trail, and here go 1 or 2 steps one way, 1 or 2 steps the other way, and almost 100% of the time, he always goes the same way the doe was going, almost 100% of the time. Now, he's not smart enough, we don't believe, or has the ability to look at tracks and tell the direction. Literally, the scent is so volatile that within a few yards, he can tell what's older and what's younger, and that's how he knows which direction to go.
Right. Right. Good point.
So my urine smells like me for 5 minutes or whatever, and then it starts breaking down and it smells like mammal urine. And in a day or two, it's really broken down. So if I put anything in that mock scrape, it's Grant.
Grant buck.
So they don't care because it's just breaking down into chemical parts.
I have urinated. I'm a kidney. I'll share with y'all. I'm a kidney transplant patient.
Okay.
And I've been blessed with great health. I've had a transplant 23 years. But transplant patients should not hold their urine. There's some reasons you don't want to get a bladder infection or whatever. So out of my tree stand, all across America, I have never felt that deter a deer from coming in.
Interesting.
Ever. But I've had a bunch of bucks come smell where I TT'd 30 minutes earlier.
Okay.
No kidding.
I would have not imagined that. That's fascinating.
Oh, I have all my little oddities and quirks too, but one of them is not carrying a pee bottle through the woods. I pity the poor boys that are still carrying a pee bottle through the woods.
Yeah, because all these years you hear about the guys that carry it around and because they don't want the deer to smell them, but in fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah, your breath is doing, I promise you, your breath is doing way more damage than that.
Okay.
That's good.
So how do you combat the breath now that we're on the topic of breath? What do you do?
Yeah, I don't know. I used, candidly, I use dead downwind. They are based on enzymes versus bacteria. It's just a little science here.
Yep.
About 80% of the bacteria on your body is needed to keep you alive. if you killed 100% of the bacteria on your body, you would die. Literally, you would die.
Okay.
Most of the bacteria in the world is beneficial. We hear bacteria, and I think we all think of a negative. I mean, I do. I think of strep or, some kind of bad bacteria.
Right.
But most bacteria in the world, helps us grow crops or, there's all kind of symbiotic or beneficial relationships of bacteria. About 20% of bacteria in the world is considered bad for plants or humans or whatever. So anything that says kills 100% of the bacteria, I'm not putting on my body, that's for sure.
Right.
Enzymes are really cool things. They use enzymes to take the odor out of septic treatment plants in every major metropolitan area across America, because it can reduce. They can create enzymes to attack or break apart so they're ineffective, very specific molecules. And that's the advantage of using enzymes for scent control. And it's not 100% perfect by any stretch, but they can literally make these enzymes for very specific molecules. So humans have two types of sweat. One's just perspiration, and I don't know, maybe you have that. I have the second type, which is that kind of oily sweat. If you're jogging real hard, you get that oily sweat on you.
Yep.
That's the stuff that really smells. And so they can create enzymes to break those apart. They're not doing away with them. They just break them apart so they're not making any odor.
Okay.
So I use that for my breath. And another thing some people do, and I don't know, I think there's some science behind it. I've studied it, and I'm kind of on the fence about it. But I think it's probably neutral. Is a lot of people suck on apple bits because of the chlorophyll in the apples. And chlorophyll is a natural deodorizer.
Right.
So a lot of people just, have dehydrated, because the dehydration process obviously in breaking down the chlorophyll. People take dehydrated apple slices out in the woods and, suck on them all day long. I'm not a huge fan of that because apples are a lot of fiber, and that particular reaction of having a lot of fiber in your system is an odor that deer probably don't like too well. So,
right.
I don't know if I'm on an all day hunt, the last thing I want to do is start about 8 a.m. eating apple bits, because by noon I'm out of my tree.
Right. Good point. All right. So we've covered acorns. We've covered food plots. We've covered mock scrapes. We've covered your breath. We've covered.
Yeah. Kind of where to put these things, I think, is an important thing. So this time of year, deer at my place and throughout most of the Midwest, they've already shed their summer coat, that short reddish hair.
Yep.
Deer don't have sweat glands, so in the summer they have short red hair, so heat can leave their body very rapidly. The red reflects the sun, and the short hair just doesn't hold heat. And they're already growing that longer, darker hair. They're putting their winter coat on. Deer molt twice a year. They put a summer coat on, they put a winter coat on. And they literally shed the rest of that hair. And so they got that dark coat on now, and it's still, where you are, 80 degrees, maybe more, maybe less, and they're storing fat, so it's hot, It's like you having to go to work with your overalls on in September. No one does that.
Right.
So typically bucks, especially the larger the body of the animal, the tougher it is to get rid of body heat. So if I'm hunting a mature buck right now, this time of year, I'm hunting very close to a bedding area. And these bucks we saw the other night were 100 yards off a bedding area, a known thicket, because they're just not going to get out of that bed very long before dark to go eat. So you don't want to be in the bedding area because you're going to blow them out. You want to find an area where food and cover are very close together, and the thermals and wind and whatever it is allows you to approach that area without alerting the deer.
Gotcha. Okay.
So close. This isn't the old December stand where they're bedded on a south slope trying to stay warm, and they're walking 2 miles to Joe's cornfield that he didn't get harvested because it rained or whatever. They're not doing that this time of year. They're moving very short distances. They're uncomfortable.
Gotcha. All right. So they're hot. They're sweaty. Not that they're really sweaty, but that's the equivalent to what we would feel.
And so that makes it very tough to hunt mornings this time of year because deer are feeding and bedding so close together. And in the morning, pre-daylight, they're probably already on their feet. And so it's very tough to go in a morning hunt. It takes a really good setup to be able to get in there without alerting deer before you get to your stand this time of year. I rarely hunt mornings in September or early October unless there's a very strong weather front coming in. I mean, that barometer is either really high or really low, and I think deer are going to be really active.
Gotcha. That's a good one. So this time of year, mornings could be very difficult unless you know the exact situation.
Yeah, you need to know what's going on, and somehow you can get in between the two, bedding and cover, without alerting the deer. You've got a good backdoor plan, maybe down a creek or, just there's some landform that allows you to get in there.
Gotcha. Man, that's good. All right. Anything else that you can think of?
I want to throw out one last thing is, everyone's scouting this time of year, and they say, my buddies just said, man, I just found a whole bunch of sign. I'm on top of a bunch of sign. I'm going to get one. I say, I don't know about that, because just think about this. Where do deer spend most of their time? Where are they going to leave most of the sign? Where they're most comfortable? Where they're going to spend the most hours? So you find a whole bunch of sign. It's probably a feeding area or bedding area, and you really can't hunt either. They're going to feed probably right at dark or after dark right now, and of course you can't get in the bedding area without alerting them. So I'm rarely hunting the most sign I find, and that just boggles some hunter's mind. I'm hunting in between two places of the most sign I find, because if it's the most sign I found, that's where deer are really comfortable, and there's some reason they're comfortable. It means they feel very safe there. The wind's swirling, or they're there after dark, or whatever it is, and I probably can't be there at the same time they're there. So the most sign is rarely the best stand location.
That makes a lot of sense, though.
It does. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, so ideally you want to try to find two spots where there's a lot of sign and then hunt.
Yeah, figure out how they're traveling in between there. Why are the deer there, and how are they traveling in between those areas? And then if you really get technical, if you're really like got your razor game on, I like these guys always say, boy, I want to hunt right where the wind's on my nose, man, it's perfect. And you can get away with that if you're hunting immature deer or whatever, but if you're sure enough trying to, kill an old wise deer, because deer certainly learn, if it's 100% in your favor, that means it's 100% against a buck, a mature deer, and they're probably not going to be there. You got to kind of push the edge, and my ideal wind is like a 45-degree angle. I'm just on the edge of getting busted, and that deer is just on the edge of feeling safe. Because if it's totally in my favor, that mature buck's not going to feel safe there. He's going to be on the edge. He's going to be nervous.
Interesting.
So the best stands that I have the most success out of are those stands where, man, I'm just right on the edge of being busted. You're like, man, don't switch wind, don't swirl wind. Because that's the area where the bucks are probably going to be the most comfortable. I'm talking about during daylight hours.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's get in real quick, Grant, about the water source. We hear a lot of things, these warmer temperatures, early season water sources. What? Give us your breakdown on what the deer are doing as far as, to hydrate themselves.
Yeah, deer are probably going to water this time of year because the plants, early spring plants are about 70% water, depending on the species of plant. So they're getting most of the water they need just through consuming, young forage. This time of year, that's not true. And if I'm in West Texas or somewhere where standing water is just really rare, I'm hunting, 100 yards from the water. I rarely hunt right over water. But I'm going to hunt 100 yards from the water or something like that. Here in the Ozarks where there's creeks and ponds everywhere, in most places where there's creeks and ponds everywhere, boy, it's doggone tough to figure out which source of water they're going to. And another thing is, deer typically like smaller sources of water. They're going to go drink out of some little mud hole before they go drink out of a 500-acre lake, because a big lake means it's tough for them to avoid predation. Little mud hole doesn't have any noise. The water's not so big. It's causing some funky thermals to rearrange the scent pattern there, and they can guard themselves against predation even while drinking. Because remember, the number one motivation for a deer, especially a mature deer, is survival. So let's say you own, 7 tree stands, and you set 4 of them over water sources. You say, man, I got this bad boy limited out. There's 4 ponds, and I got all of them covered. Whichever way the wind's right for is what I'm hunting. And the day before you go hunting, it comes a thunderstorm, and every cow track and mud puddle fills up with water, and there's not a deer going to a pond anywhere on the property. So I'm not a huge water fan for whitetails. If you're in the high Rocky Mountains and you're chasing elk, man, water can be critical. Or you're in West Texas or somewhere really droughty, or it's a drought where you live. Boy, you're in an area and the drought just really has dried up most of the ponds. There's no rain in the forecast. Water can be awesome. On the average area from, I'm going to say from mid-Kansas eastern, it's tough to pattern deer on water.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Grant, one other question before we let you go, and I appreciate you hanging in there with us and really just filling us full of great information. If you're hunting, go back to the deer, they're hot this time of year because it's still hot out and they don't like to move when they're hot. Sure. Are there particular areas of bedding areas that you could zone in on, or is it more that you want to zone in on the food areas and the bedding areas will be nearby? Which one do you go for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's think about that just a second. Most of us, I'm going to bet myself included, most people listening, are going to the same bedroom, unless you're traveling for work or whatever, almost every night. And you control the conditions by, a thermostat or more covers or, whatever it is. Deer don't do that. So deer don't have necessarily a bedding area. They have different bedding areas for different conditions. So this time of year it's warm. They're typically going to bed, unless you're in flatland, on a north slope where it's cooler. And they're going to bed under some type of shade or cover because the thermals are going to draft cool air in that shade. It's just simply a comfort zone. And if we were making a living out there on land, we'd be doing the same thing. This time of year, we'd be on the shady side of the slope. Late winter, we'd be over there on the south side of the slope trying to get the sun's energy.
Okay.
So think about bedding areas being where the deer can be safe, A, and most comfortable, B, for those conditions that day. We adjust our conditions, again, through thermostat or what we wear, whatever. Deer have to go where the conditions are most favorable for them.
Yep. Okay.
So north slopes, heavy timber, they're not, I talk a lot about native grass as bedding cover, but that's not a summer bedding cover because you think about it, there's no wind blowing there. If you lay down in a native grass field that's 4 or 5 feet tall, it's stifling hot. There's no breeze blowing, but the sun is shining through the grass down on you.
Right.
Deer are not bedded in native grass, at least in daytime this time of year. They may go up there at nighttime, but not at daytime. They're going to be under a canopy on a north slope.
What about swampy areas where there's water? That kind of
where there's evaporative cooling going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Anywhere where the conditions are favorable for them.
Okay. All right. And that's going to change as we progress through the season.
Yeah. It can change daily. You know, so cold to me or deer is 10 or 20% cooler than normal for that day. Cold isn't a degree mark on the thermometer.
Right.
It's not like deer think 30 degrees is cold. If it's supposed to be 70 today and it's 50, you can bet I'm going to be hunting, and the deer are going to act a little differently. Just like, guys, the first 60-degree day in the spring, we'll go, man, this is warm, this is great.
Yeah. But
if it's 60 degrees in July, we're going, ooh, this is a cold day.
Good point. So
and deer the same way because they're, they got body fat on or different colored hair or whatever it is. Their bodies are made for the average conditions on that day. And if the average conditions are warmer when it's warm outside, they're probably going to be less active during daylight hours. Mm-hmm. And if it's cooler, they're going to be more active. And the opposite is true in the late winter. So, it's supposed to be, let's say 30 and it's 0. That can shut some deer down for a day or two. But then it warms up to 40. It's 10 degrees warmer than normal. 10 degrees warmer than normal in the rut can be horrible. It's supposed to be 50 and it's 75. That's horrible. 10 degrees warmer than normal in January. I'm going to be out there hunting. Hey, it's easier on me and a deer going, woo, I'm not burning near as many calories today getting food as I did on a normal day. I'm going to be on my feet today.
Gotcha. All right. So they will react to the contrasting temperature swings.
Absolutely. People ask me all the time, how do I predict when to take my vacation? When should I schedule my vacation? Man, if I could solve that question, I wouldn't have to work anymore. I just returned from an elk hunt out in Colorado.
Yep.
It was 90 degrees most days I was there. 90. It was great hiking weather, but it was horrible elk hunting weather.
Right.
I basically went on some really long hikes with my bow over my shoulder. I mean, I'm there. I'm going to hunt, but the elk weren't doing much where I was.
Gotcha.
And the week before, one of my buddies were tagging elk like crazy. When it's that hot and deer have to regulate their temperature through their behavior and where they bed and whatnot, they just were not moving during the daylight, even though it's a rut for elk.
So it sounds like we need to pay a little bit more attention to temperature as well.
Temperature is a big factor. I mean, I'll take temperature over moon phase 7 days out of the week.
Gotcha.
Yeah, temperature is a huge factor. Barometer is a factor because barometer is just a pretty accurate predictor of weather fronts coming or going.
Yeah. Excellent. Wow, we've just covered a lot of stuff. Dr. Woods, I can't thank you enough for spending almost an hour with us. I think my brain's kind of full right now. Dusty, I don't know how you feel.
Oh man, just soaking it all in. Dr. Grant Woods is somebody that's full of information, and boy, you don't have to talk much to get him to spill it and share it. And we appreciate that very much.
Yeah, we could talk all night and just we could listen to you for weeks, actually. But I think we nailed the early season tactics, and thanks for sharing all your insights about what you've learned over the years.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity, and I just really wish everyone has a great and safe fall out there. Last thing I'd like to say is, guys, our biggest responsibility or our biggest trophy is coming home safely. So wear those safety harnesses, have gun safety. That's just overlooked and such an important part of having an enjoyable hunt.
That
Absolutely.
is so true. Excellent.
Hey, Grant, real quick, where can listeners find you? Not off the air.
Hey, just go to growingdeer.tv or growingdeer.com, either one. We we make a weekly video. It's not necessarily hunting. It's just about what deer are doing or what we're learning that week. So just growingdeer.com will get you there. And every week we put up a new video. We just celebrated our 300th anniversary, 300 weeks of never having a repeat show.
Wow. That's awesome. That's some
crazy
content right there.
I haven't figured that out yet.
That's fantastic.
You got to be crazy to commit to that kind of stuff. But yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us on the Big Buck podcast. And I tune into your television show a lot, and I've learned a lot from that and from just talking to you. So I really can't thank you enough. It's quite an honor.
Oh no, you guys are great hosts, and I appreciate the opportunities.
Best of luck in the whitetail woods, Grant.
Hey, you guys too. Have a safe fall. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.
Take care. I love it when we have doctors on the show because my brain is fried by the time we're done.
Well, not only that, Jay, you can relate with your science degree. You can relate to everything that they talk about when they get into a little bit of science.
Very much so. Very much so.
And I've been kind of laying back and taking all this information in because, it's an opportunity not just to learn, but to actually listen and take all this information in that Dr. Grant Woods passed along. It fulfills your mind and refreshes your system to kick off a great whitetail season.
Yeah, he's so good at what he does, and he takes it so seriously and professionally. But the great part is that he shares it back with everybody else. So, he's not just holding it to himself. He's actually relaying on the information, which helps everybody, which is just, he's a great person.
Yeah. And you're going to walk away with it from the show and learn something that you didn't know. And I guarantee it.
Right.
That's the great thing about Dr. Grant Woods. He's more willing to pass along and educate other hunters.
Right. And I learned a lot on the first show we had him on 2 years ago on episode number 19. So it's almost 100 episodes ago. But I learned as much today as I did then. And I don't think we've even touched the surface of what he knows.
Oh, absolutely not. But thank you, Dr. Grant Woods, for joining us for a little while there and spreading the word about your information and technology and factual information that you've studied all these years with the whitetail.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I am going to pee on my deer scrapes from now on.
I think I'm just going to pee out of the tree stand from now on and heck with it.
Forget the bottle.
That's right.
Leaving that home.
It's a bottle when you got Dr. Grant Woods telling you
to pee on your mock scrape. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Does it get any better than that, Jay?
We've got permission from the doctor. We have the doctor's permission slip.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to start bottling my own pee and dumping it out versus buying stuff that's out there.
Yep. Awesome. Just awesome. Thank you, Dr. Grant Woods. So, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, we do. Pee out of your tree stand.
Boom. Period. Done.
That's it, man. I'm sticking with what Dr. Grant Woods tells us.
Pee out of your tree stand. Love it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that being said, Dusty, where can we find you when you're not peeing out of your tree stand and not here on the mic?
I knew it was coming. You can shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can also look me up on Facebook, facebook.com/chubbygobbler, facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. If you want to hit me up on Instagram, @ChasingAntler. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not thinking about me peeing out my tree stand?
Well, that's an interesting visual. You can find me. Best place to reach me is jay@bigbuckregistry.com. Shoot me an email there. You can always find our entire Facebook contingent at facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. If you just shot a fantastic deer and you would like to get some recognition for it, it's not a contest and you're not going to win anything, but it's all about pride and just being happy with your success and showing it off to other hunters who will appreciate it as well. Go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck. All the instructions are right there. We'll get it posted up on Facebook for you. Other than that, if you're listening to this show on an Apple device, please subscribe to this show. And if you love the show enough, leave us a review by doing a search for Big Buck Registry and typing in a 5-star review if you like the show. If you have a few extra bucks and you'd like to donate to help our cause to pay the bills around here, it's bigbuckregistry.com/donate. And if you would like to use our app to listen to this show, bigbuckregistry.com/app. Or if you're on an Android device, bigbuckregistry.com/G-app. I think that's about it, brother.
That's a whole lot of big buck. And thanks again to Dr. Grant Woods for filling our minds full of information that we can very well easily take our hunt to the next level with.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, I'm Jay Scott.
And I'm Dusty Phillips.
This is the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. See you next week.
Can't wait.